Good morning, America, and other countries too. We don't want to leave you guys out. It's Monday, December 16th, 2024, which means A, you're alive, and B, you're listening to the TMI Show, Too Much Information for short, also known as the Ted Manila Info Show. And we really appreciate you being here. I am Ted Rall. Over there is Robbie West, also known as Putinbot Gaming in the gaming world. Robbie sitting in for Manila Chan. Manila Chan is still out sick, desperately ill, but we are crossing our fingers. We had hoped she might be back today, but she's still, a little bit wobbly, so we're giving her today off. Tomorrow, we're hoping she'll be back. So I'd say it's looking pretty good. Basically, it turns out, for people who are wondering, she had pneumonia and pleurisy, and it turned out that the doctor basically gave her some, just enough to sort of linger on, not get worse, but not get better. People who have respiratory issues, like I'm one of them, kind of know what that's like. But they didn't give her the strong meds she needed to blast the SOB out of her lungs. And so now finally she went to Robbie and I yelled at her and we were like, you have to go back and get a real doctor and fire your doctor and get a new doctor. And she finally took our advice and that worked. So we're going to mansplain this thing and we won. And so we were right. And so she's getting better. And so that's what matters. It's the results that matter. Anyway, you are tuned into the Ted Manila Information Show, TMI for short, where we always bring you too much information. Everything from the news to politics, lifestyle, culture, fad trends, tech, biology, chemistry, the taboo, the occult, anything and everything goes, because we think you can never have too much information. If you're looking for that straight-laced, button-down news program, you should still watch, but you might find it not really for you. But, hey, sometimes you have to take your medicine. It's stuff you want to hear about, and maybe some stuff you never know you needed to know, and hopefully we'll have a few laughs along the way. We're here live Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern, and we stream anytime, including archived episodes. Please be sure to like and follow the show. A lot of you guys have been doing that, and we've noticed the numbers ticking up, and we really want to thank you for that. We've also seen more direct support. The two main platforms that we appear, well, there's three main platforms. For video and audio, you can watch us and hear us on YouTube and Rumble. And on both of those, you can follow or subscribe. On Rumble, you can also become a paid supporter. On YouTube, you can be part of something called Locals, which also allows you to be isn't that Locals is a YouTube?
Locals is on Rumble.
Oh, Rumble also. I'm sorry. So we have our first ever Locals supporter. It decided to help us out, and we appreciate you. Also, we're also on RSS through audio in all the normal places like Apple Music and podcasts and Spotify, Pandora, blah, blah, blah. If there's any place that you like to check out your podcast and you're not finding us, shoot us a line and we will fix that. You can contact the show at TMI Show question, singular question, at yahoo.com. And we'll answer your question. If you have a question for us and you record it on a short audio clip, send it as a file attachment to the Yahoo account, TMI Show question at yahoo.com. We will answer it on the air, which can be sort of fun. All right, let's get into, I believe we should just get into the news. Anything you want to say before we do that?
No, I'm just glad that we finally got to mansplain something to Manila and not be called sexist, racist, or bigots because of it. Because frankly, we're two white dudes who did mansplain to Manila, like, your doctor sucks. You need to fire this guy. He's a quack. He's a clown. And she listened. So
that's true.
So the patriarchy won one.
Patriarchy. That's true. True. And no, I mean, hey, if we don't stand up for the patriarchy, who will? Patriarchy is so under fire these days. All right, let's move on to the headlines. Okay, East Coast residents and lawmakers are demanding answers again after yet another slew of drone sightings throughout the Northeast, with the origins of the craft still remaining unclear. Matthew Morello, mayor of Washington Township, New Jersey, told Good Morning America this morning that he thinks something's going on, do you think, expressing concern and frustration at the lack of answers from the federal authorities. I'm not trying to stir anything up, but we all know if you just turn on the television that drones can be used in an aggressive fashion, Morello said. Man, they hire the geniuses there as mayors in New Jersey.
Yeah, that's
They
the
can carry
understatement of the
payloads.
century, right?
Duh. Yeah, they can carry payloads. They can be used for all sorts of really aggressive type things. Yes, two words, predator and reaper. White House National Security Communications Advisor John Kirby said last week that many of the reported drone sightings appear to be lawfully operated manned aircraft, saying that there was no evidence at this time that the reported drone sightings pose a national security or a public safety threat or have a foreign nexus. Robbie, I love this logic. Like I pointed it out last week, and I'll point it out again. We don't really know what's going on, but we don't think it's dangerous. Now, how come that logic doesn't apply to other things? I mean, it didn't apply, for example, to Saddam Hussein. We don't really know if he has weapons of mass destruction. So we don't really know what's going on. So we'll just assume he's not dangerous, right? Yeah. How come we don't do that? We don't really know if Russia had any role whatsoever in the 2016 election. So we're just going to assume that it didn't happen. That's actually more logical than this. I mean, literally the whole purpose of spending 54% of your federal tax dollar on defense is to have, defense of, our country, the country that we live in. And these things are flying all over the place and nobody knows what they are, except maybe here's the thing. I don't know what's worse. Either the government knows what's going on and they're not telling us, or they don't know what's going on because they're lame. I don't know which is worse.
Yeah, I don't know either. But I mean, they kind of go along with what you're just talking about. If the vast majority of Americans are not dangerous or not a threat, then why does the NSA spy on every email, text message, and phone call that we make? Why does the government care what library books I check out? Because if the vast majority of us aren't dangerous, I mean, if it works with drones, why does it work with people?
It's true. I mean, for me, a lot of the news comes down to thought process, right? Like, for example, Luigi Mangione. Some people are like, I'm scared to know that a murderer is running around. Well, unless you're a healthcare CEO, you probably don't need to worry. I think TMI co-hosts are safe from people like Luigi Mangione. In fact, Luigi, if you want to call into the show, we're here for you. We'll do
sometimes drug dealers
however
get
long
whacked.
they give you. Yeah, that's true. It's just illogical. Anyway,
so I have a question for you. I have a quick question. So, is the difference between a street tough who is an unlicensed pharmacist versus a pharmacist with a 401k? Is that the distinction? So, is this like one drug pit dealer is more important than another because of the size of the 401k, maybe the stock options? Is that the defining line?
Yes, this is kind of like it's kind of like violence, the state sanctioned violence. Violence there's no place for violence. Well, what they really mean is among you and me, like freelancers, individuals, we're not allowed to engage in violence. But if you're the state, of course you can bomb people, you can drone them as you will, you can have them assassinated, and then you later say, like Osama bin Laden, we brought him to justice. I'm like, I don't know, I was missing the indictment part. I didn't see any courtroom. Jurors, didn't see those, but justice has a different meaning. Now that's exactly the difference. All right, let's move on. Mayor Morello says those living under the drones are not happy about it. That's a wonderful thing to tell your residents, he said when asked about Kirby's assurances. That's fantastic until it's not. Nobody knows what these things are doing, Morello says. Best case scenario, they're just getting video of us. Again, I don't know why out here. We're nothing but farm country. If you want videos of cows, I'd be happy to send you some. Cow porn. Morello cast doubt on the official statements suggesting no perceived threat. We've heard that before from our federal government. We're not looking. We're not watching you. We're not watching your calls. We're not doing anything. Mm-hmm. And don't worry, we're here and we're here to help. It's people are decrying the lack of faith and trust that citizens have in their government. But really, truly, the government's not giving us much to work with here.
I wonder if there's a big problem with cow tipping over there. That's why their drones are flying over the cow country. Are they trying to catch the people tipping over the cows? Is that a problem? Uh-oh, I think we lost Ted. Boys and girls, I think we just lost Ted. 1 second here.
Oh, I'm here. I'm here.
No,
Can
you're
you hear me?
here? Okay, good deal. Yep. Now,
Okay.
now I can
Yeah,
because you kind of stalled out. You went
Am I
all.
all right? Am I frozen or am I
You have been
moving?
recovered. You have the jaws have brought you back to life.
Oh, thank
Manila's
God.
working remotely, I guess.
Okay, cool. All right, that's good to hear. Yeah, no, I mean, it's speaking of cows. So I was part of a cow related prank in high school where
Oh, I got to
I
hear
had
this.
I had read somewhere that cows can walk upstairs but not downstairs. I don't know if this is true about other hooved animals, but apparently it's true about cows. And so, long story short, my near do well miscreant friends and I borrowed a pickup truck from some friends, and we went and stole a farmer's cow, which was hard. Okay, let me just say, so we drove out to the countryside outside of Kettering and drove the cow up a ramp into the back of the pickup. By the way, it's really, we kept thinking we'd be caught, like we're driving through the suburbs with a, and they're big,
Sure.
a big ass cow in the back of the pickup. And this was before the days where, like, now you have the Ford F-150, which is, a pickup truck that's the size of like a house, but they didn't have those back then, right? So this was just a pickup truck. Anyway, we're driving along. Long story short, we got into the school because we had taped one of the doors so that the deadlock wouldn't deploy. So we got into the school and we walked the cow we smacked him on the ass and got him to go up the stairs. It worked great, actually. We were like worried that he would like fall back and like, hurt himself or us, but no, actually he just walked up the stairs up to the roof, and we got him onto the roof of the school. And it was one of the most glorious moments really of my life, because it's like, there's just nothing like, it was the classic, like, Hereford, like, black and white spotted cow. And there he is on the roof of Fairmont West High School, I guess and was, just up there moving. And it was the panic in the town. I mean, you would have thought it was 9/11. The police came. The school was massively disrupted, which was, of course, the main point. And then ultimately, and I still have somewhere in my files the photo from the newspaper of the crane that came to they put it under the cow's belly and they lifted it off the roof. It took hours. It was wonderful. It was just like, I wish I could have done that every day. It was just like the best thing.
So, yeah, that's funner than the story I shared with you off camera. 100%. I mean,
your story is wilder though. Although I would probably today be accused of animal cruelty, and rightly so.
Well, the cow didn't care. She had a nice trip out of it. She didn't care. And the school kids, they had a break. I mean, it's no harm, no foul. It's not like you were playing with explosives or
we did endanger her. We did endanger her, but all right, here we go.
Well, she enjoyed it.
I hope. Yeah, well, she got her. It gave her some new things to think about. The chairman and top Democrat on a U.S. House of Representatives committee about China told the CEOs of Google parent Alphabet, which I know that's true that it's called Alphabet, but I kind of don't accept that, and Apple, that they have to be ready to take TikTok off of their app stores by January 19th. That's in just a month. Last week, a U.S. federal appeals court upheld a law requiring the China-based ByteDance parent company to divest TikTok in the U.S. or be banned. Representative John Moulinier, Republican and chairman of the committee, and the top Democrat on the committee, Representative Raha Krishnamurti, separately urged TikTok CEO Zhou Zhenchu to sell the app used by 170 million Americans. Congress has acted decisively to defend the national security of the United States. Never mind the drones, but let's go after TikTok and protect TikTok's American users from the Chinese Communist Party. This is exactly an example of what I mean, right? There's literally no evidence whatsoever that the CCP has ever had any influence on ByteDance or TikTok at all. Well, they could. Well, anything, but there's no evidence. Sure. We urge TikTok to immediately execute a qualified divestiture, the lawmakers said. Apple, Alphabet, and TikTok did not comment. Today, ByteDance and TikTok made an emergency bid to block the law pending review by the U.S. Supreme Court. I don't know if the U.S. Supreme Court is going to step in on time. I suspect they will, because this has some pretty dramatic effects on business, where you have Congress stepping in without really any cause whatsoever to single out a single company, albeit from a foreign entity, and to crush it. And, it's not going to be a good look for the Gen Zers and the millennials who like TikTok. I mean, I personally think it's insipid. But something being insipid, hell, we can get rid of for that rate, we can get rid of MSNBC, CNN, Fox, both political parties. Everything's insipid in this country. But I don't know. This TikTok thing, it is wrong. It is first they came for my TikTok and then they came for my Reddit or whatever.
So I really wish we had a lawyer on here, because the way that I look at it now, I take this for what it is. I'm just some hick out and flyover country, but I always thought that before you could be deprived of property, you had to be accused of a crime, go through due process, be found guilty, and then your property could be taken away from you. It seems like to me this is a case of the government taking away property, in this case a business, from a business owner. And I can't see where there's been any accusation of a crime even being committed, much less a conviction. So how does this even work? How can the Supreme Court not get involved?
Well, so here's the precedent, right? There are national security concerns whenever a foreign company owns and operates in the United States.
But
so let me give you an
Google a foreign
example. When I
company?
used to work at the Japanese bank in the 1980s, we had a Pardon?
Yeah, Google is an
a foreign
American
company. But
well, it is on paper, but it's an international company. They play everywhere.
True, but ByteDance is the issue here, right? So ByteDance is based in outside of the United States. So I worked. So anyway, I had one of my clients was a small defense contractor in east of Los Angeles that was owned by a Japanese company. And they made radios that were used in Jeeps that were sold to the military and stuff like that. So basically they make military radios. So it's a small, let's just say low security defense contractor, but it's still a defense contractor. And so the federal government had to sign off on the purchase of this company by a Japanese parent company to say it's okay for, first of all, Japan was an ally. So that helps. And the idea was, and it's a defense company, right? So it's kind of you can see the national security concerns. This is a big stretch from that, where they're saying we think the CCP or the Chinese government writ large could decide to, could somehow lean on ByteDance in Hong Kong and demand that they turn over user data, some of which belongs to American users, that then could become the purview of the Chinese government. Of course, the ridiculous part of this is the Chinese government and every other major intelligence operation in the world, including the South Africa, France, the United States, the United Kingdom, they all have all of this information about every internet user in the world, because they've all hacked it. It's all been found on the dark web. They've hacked it themselves. They have it. China has it. They know who I am. They know who you are. They know where we live. They know what our credit card numbers are. They know it all. So I don't really know exactly what the CCP is going to be doing, supposedly, with this data. ByteDance, by the way, says they've never cooperated with the CCP.
Well, to my knowledge, the only countries that I know of that have leaned on a social media platform demanding information and then demanding action based on information is the European Union, in the case of Telegram, and the United States government in the case of Twitter.
Yep. So that is true. Well, not to mention all the stuff that came out in the Snowden revelation, about all the back doors to AT&T. And
this is pure projection. This is pure projection.
It is projection.
It is BS to the talking about cows. Yes, this is a factory where we are creating fertilizer right now using government hypocrisy as the truck. This is insane.
It is very, very dumb. All right, so let's go to the next one. Victims of major public corruption cases in Pennsylvania and Illinois are pissed off that Biden has granted clemency to 2 convicted officials. The commutations were announced Thursday as part of a clemency package for 1,500 convicted criminals who the White House says deserve a second chance. The 2 convicted officials whose cases sparked outrage, a crooked Pennsylvania judge and a notorious Illinois fraudster, both had already been released from prison early on and put on house arrest during COVID. Now the punishment's completely over. The president already faced bipartisan criticism, of course, over his controversial pardon of his son Hunter over gun and tax crimes, totaling up to a dozen counts. A Biden administration official says the latest commutations are not individual decisions. It was a uniform decision granted to people who met certain criteria, like having a track record of good behavior while on house arrest. Here, former Pennsylvania Judge Michael Conahan, who is pretty much, what's the word I'm looking for, a total asshole, was convicted in 2011 in what was infamously called the Kids for Cash scandal. He took kickbacks from for-profit detention jails in exchange for wrongly sending kids to their facilities. The case was widely considered to be one of the worst judicial scandals in Pennsylvania history. Conahan was freed from prison due to COVID. His house arrest was set to end in 2026. The misconduct of Conahan and another judge in Luzerne County led the Pennsylvania Supreme Court to toss out 4,000 juvenile convictions. The discredited judges were ordered to pay $200 million back to their victims. Sandy Fonzo, mother of Edward Konzowski, who died by suicide after spending time behind bars as part of the kickback scheme, said she was shocked and hurt after learning of Biden's decision. Conahan's actions destroyed families, including mine, and my son's death is a tragic reminder of the consequences of his abuse of power, Fonzo told Citizens Voice, a local outlet. This pardon feels like an injustice for all of us who still suffer. Right now, I'm still processing and doing the best I can to cope with the pain that this has brought back. Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, a Democrat, also said at an unrelated news conference in Scranton, I do feel strongly that President Biden got it absolutely wrong and created a lot of pain here in northeastern Pennsylvania. If you don't know about the scandal, I urge you to check it out. But basically, he had this whole scheme where he was getting kickbacks basically for every kid that came before him. Basically, he found everybody guilty, whether they were guilty or not. And if they had a minor crime, he would sentence them as if it was a major crime. And if they had if they were convicted of something minor, he would give them throw the book at them. Basically, he just made sure to funnel as many kids as possible into this for-profit prison industrial complex outfit for juvies, and then got money back for each individual kid. And this would have gone on forever if not for one set of parents who went outside of the system and looked and got to a group in Philadelphia, and they compared the conviction rates in Luzerne County to all the other counties in Pennsylvania, and it was like one thing doesn't look like the other. It was like brr, brr, brr. So I mean, what an asshole, you know?
Oh, 100%. And this comes back to our conversation that we had last week about Luigi, personal hero of mine. I wish I had a Luigi hat. I'd be wearing it right now. With the green screen, that'd be awesome. Like top part of my head would be gone. Anyway, I talked about how President West would pardon Luigi, and then I would appoint him to be the head of the Health and Human Services Department, in which case you rightly pointed out that a president cannot pardon someone who's convicted of a state crime. Well, how is it that President Biden is able to commute, in this case, a judge of someone convicted of a state crime? I mean, how does that work? Educate me. I don't know.
That's a good question. Well, I think he probably, I think it must have been a federal offense. I think the DOJ must have stepped in. I have to look into that. It has to be. He couldn't commute a state offense.
I mean, so you're assuming though we have a functional republic that actually has jurisdiction and division of powers. So there's that.
Well, not really, but I mean, I haven't heard of any, I don't think there's any ability as of now to cross that line. All right, 7 tourists sought hospital treatment for suspected poisoning after drinking cocktails at a bar in a Fiji resort, now being investigated by the police. 4 Australians It's shocking to hear about Australians drinking alcohol, along with three other people believed to be foreign nationals, were taken to hospital after being served drinks made at a bar at the Warwick, Fiji on Saturday. The tourists aged 18 to 56 suffered nausea, vomiting, and neurological symptoms, according to the Fiji Health Ministry. By late Monday local time, bear in mind that's on the other side of the planet, 2 people remained in Lotaka's hospital's intensive care unit in stable condition. The others had been discharged, according to the Deputy Prime Minister of Fiji. The case comes just weeks after 6 tourists died from methanol poisoning after drinking at a bar in Laos. That case also prompted safety warnings about consuming alcohol overseas. Asked if methanol had anything to do with the situation in Fiji, the Fijian officials say it's too early to tell. They are still working on the investigation. Sydney resident David Sando told the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, that's their ABC, that he'd received a call saying his daughter and granddaughter were both being hospitalized. He said they were among a group of people who drank a pina colada before falling ill. There was a group of them in the lounge of the resort, and they had a similar cocktail, and unfortunately 7 people came down with the symptoms that have been talked about, he said. He said his relatives were scheduled to fly home on Monday. Australian media reports suggested one of the ill tourists was American. The U.S. Embassy in Fiji said that it was aware of the reports but had nothing more to add. So, I guess, it's probably not realistic to tell people when they travel to foreign exotic resorts that they shouldn't drink the local booze as well as the local water. But there you have it. It's mysterious.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's weird. I mean, really, the extent of my foreign travel is whenever I moved from South Alabama up to Montana. That really was kind of like going to an entirely different country. That's about the extent of my international jauntings, if you want to call it that.
Well, I've had many libations in a variety of countries around the world, and I have to say, this story doesn't change anything for me. It's more like a shoulder shrug. I always wonder, I mean, is this like an insane person, like the bartender who poisoned the drinks? I mean, like, what's going on?
Well, back home, and by back home, I mean in the South, moonshine is still very popular. And so if you don't ferment it just right, I mean, you literally can get stuff like the women will drink it. They'll start growing hair on their chest and people will go blind. And I mean, it just it has to be done right. So I wonder if this is a case of a moonshiner in Laos who just didn't let his crop ferment long enough.
But it doesn't sound like it. I mean, this is the Warwick, which is a very high end resort. So I don't think they're buying moonshine.
Hey, listen, if you're trying to cut costs, you're going to cut costs however it is that you can. I mean, I would not put it past them. I mean, no, our dear friend Manila, her doctor is trying to kill her by underprescribing her what she needed to get better because the insurance companies want to cut costs. Who the hell says the bars and the hotels won't do the same thing?
Well, I mean, it's fair, but yeah, I don't know. To me, this is sort of like, I don't know what happened here. I usually think I know what happened. And finally, I kept this from last week. And I'm glad we get to talk about it. This is really interesting. And I know it might seem a little dry, but please pay attention. The nearly 3 million rivers that weave across the world are experiencing rapid and surprising changes with drastic implications for everything from drinking water to floods, according to a new study. Scientists mapped the flow of water through every single river on Earth every day over the past 35 years using satellite data and computer modeling. What they found shocked them. Nearly half of the world's biggest downstream rivers, 44%, saw a drop in the amount of water flowing through them each year, according to this study published in the journal Science. Rivers like the Congo, which is Africa's second largest river, the Yangtze, which weaves through China, and the Plata in South America saw significant declines. That, according to Dongmei Feng, the lead author of the study and a hydrology professor at the University of Cincinnati. For the smallest upstream rivers, mostly in mountainous areas, it was a different story. 17% saw an increase in flow rate. While the studies didn't delve into the reasons behind the changes, the authors say the clear drivers are human activity and climate change, which is shifting rainfall patterns and accelerating snowmelt. Previous studies have tended to focus on water flows through only the biggest rivers and produce results limited to specific locations at specific times, according to a co-author of the study. The methods used in this research allowed them to look everywhere all at once. While this might not yet give the local precision of the other studies, this is probably the most accurate map of river flow ever made in U.S. history. The conclusion: holy cow, the rivers of the world are a lot different than we thought. Some are changing by 5 to 10% annually, the report said. That is rapid change, the author said. The rivers are like the blood vessels of the earth, and changes to how they flow have profound effects, says Fang. Significant decreases in downstream rivers mean less water is available on the largest parts of many of the planet's rivers. This translates to less fresh water for people to drink, to water crops, and of course to water livestock. Slower flows also mean rivers have less power to move sediment, which is dirt and small rock. This has big impacts further downstream, since you need sediment to build river deltas, which provide natural protection against sea level rise, and also that brings fertilizer to a lot of to farmers' fields. There are a lot of fields that that are grazed when the water is low, and then when the water is high, they're left to re-sediment. For the smallest rivers, many of which are affected by increasing ice and snowmelt as the world continues to warm, faster flows have some positive impacts, like providing nutrients to fish and helping with their migration, but there's also more problems. Faster flow may throw an unexpected wrench in hydropower plants in areas such as the Himalayas, as more sediment is transported downstream, which clogs up the infrastructure for these big dams. It also worsens flooding. There was a 42% increase in big floods from small upstream rivers over the 35-year period, the study found. Gleason pointed to Vermont, which has experienced devastating flooding in recent summers due to factors including climate change, which is supercharging rainfall intensity, and humans interfering with river flow. I don't know. It's scary, scary shit.
Yeah, no, it's wild because here where I am, the Libby Dam, it's a huge hydroelectric dam here in the northwest corner of Montana. And it provides electricity for not only here where I live, but Colorado, Utah, and other cities. And it would be interesting to see, if that trend continues, how is that going to affect the alpine dams, like the one I'm talking about? Because if it gets to where that you just, you can't turn the engines, then what's going to happen to the energy infrastructure here in the country? Maybe we should start looking at these things called nuclear power plants and stop damming up the water and let the nature actually work the way it's supposed to.
Well, dams are definitely, dams are bad. I mean, except when they're for flood control. And even then, I'm not really sure. I mean, it might be that places that get flooded are meant to get flooded, and we should just move away from them. I mean, you kind of
agree.
Fighting nature is generally bad.
No, I completely agree. And I mean, it's just, I don't know. I think that people keep on thinking that they know better, that we are the masters of our own fate. We can bend the earth to our will. We can kind of quote Genesis, ye can be as gods. I think that's the mentality that a lot of people have. It's just like, we are the dominant species. We will do whatever we want. And if the earth doesn't like it, we will force it to comply. And I don't really know how well that's going to work.
So Robbie, I mean, before we move on to our main topic this morning, you're a Christian. How do you feel about what you just referred to is sometimes called the dominionism, right? The idea, like it's sort of right out of the book of Genesis, that, where God basically says, I made everything for you, all the plants, the animals, the universe. I made it for you humans, to use as you will. And that's been interpreted by some Christians as saying, that we have dominion over the earth. Everything's been put here for us to eat or whatever. How do you feel about, do you think that's, apostasy, or do you think that's an accurate translation of the Bible?
I think it's accurate, but here's the thing, though: is whenever God created Adam, he was a gardener. So yes, we do have dominion over the earth, but we are supposed to be stewards. One of the things, if you read through those old boring books in the Old Testament, like Leviticus, that people just don't like to read because of how dry they are. The Bible is very clear. If you are going to get eggs from a nest, you don't kill the mama bird. So I mean, there are very strict things about being a steward of your environment. use the environment. Yes, that's what it's there for. But be a steward of it. Don't just go rape, pillage, and just destroy everything for grins and giggles.
Okay. I got to agree with that. All right. So let's move on. Donald Trump has been saying, he said throughout the campaign, and he also has been repeating in recent days, that he'd like to abolish birthright citizenship. And for people who don't know, I'm going to just tee this up, what birthright citizenship. So the U.S. is among 32 countries, mostly here in the Western Hemisphere, in the Americas, that have birthright citizenship. That means if you're born here, no matter what, like let's say your parents are changing planes, the plane and whatever, and your mom was 9 months pregnant and she drops you like while you're changing planes at Miami International Airport, you are born in the United States and you get a United States passport. Conservatives have long complained that the 14th Amendment, passed in 1868, provides a loophole for so-called anchor babies, of whom there are at least 4 million born to illegal immigrants. In other words, people who, in that situation, where the kid is born here in the U.S., the parents are not. It's called an anchor baby because it's politically and logistically fraught to chuck out, to say, well, leave that baby here, and this baby who has the right to stay here, but you, the parents who take care of it, have to leave. But those numbers are dropping annually. Jus soli, or the right of the soil, is in the crosshairs of the incoming second Trump administration, with the president-elect threatening to eliminate it by executive order now. Without birthright citizenship, however, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people could be forced back into the shadows, refusing to call the police or the fire department for fear of deportation, and become stateless. In France, there are second and even third generation stateless people who couldn't go back home, quote unquote, even if they wanted to. They don't speak the local language. They haven't been there ever in their entire lives. So, Robbie and I have different points of view about this matter. My point of view might surprise some people because I am a lefty. I do think that you're not a nation state unless you guard your borders. I do think that the idea that the Biden administration's policy, completely unexplained and not discussed to the American people, has been a catastrophe of PR, and it was a major contributor to the loss in the election. Basically, it was like they threw the gates open, they didn't explain why, and they let in a bunch of people without checking very carefully, and some of them turned out to be criminals and bad people. And so that's been catastrophic. That said, I would like to see more legal citizenship. I'd like to see it should be easier to come here because we do need people. So I think we should make it more, easier for people who want to come to the United States to apply, and get a security check and make sure that they're able to work and be, fairly well educated, so that they're less likely to end up requiring public support. But this is a nation of immigrants, but I'll tell you, my take on birthright citizenship is that it's a good idea because the alternative is worse. Even though you might end up with anchor babies and stuff, the alternative is really dangerous. And, I have French citizenship through my mom, and it's because she was born there. Now, the thing is, this is an absurdity. I've never lived in France, right, for any length of time. Yet I have a French passport. I can go live in France, work in France, own property in France, start a business in France, open a French bank account. No muss, no fuss. Meanwhile, there are people who came, basically they're in France, like ethnically Algerian, Moroccan, whatever, Senegalese, who came to France like 100 years ago, and they are still undocumented and stateless in France. Most countries in the world have this problem. And so you have these second-class citizens who are off the grid. They can't hold a legitimate job. They end up, a lot of them become criminals because that's the only work they can find, or they're just permanently in the underclass and they end up on welfare illegally. They're scamming off the system. They're selling drugs. It's bad for society overall. So that's my take. And there's, of course, we should get into the whole question of the legality of what Donald Trump seeks to do. I don't think he can do this without amending the U.S. Constitution, but
I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not a lawyer. I have very strong opinions about this, but that's all they are. They are opinions. I'm not a legal scholar. I'm just a guy who lives in the real world, right? So, as someone who does read occasionally, okay, I read a lot. One of the things that the 14th Amendment puts out is that it's very specific in its clause about jurisdiction. So, for birthright citizenship to take effect, you have the parents had to be in the jurisdiction of the United States. So, what does that mean? Like, if I go up into Canada, I mean, yes, I'm in their country, but I am not in the jurisdiction of Canada. I'm not a Canadian citizen. I cannot use any of those. I can't vote there. I have no status. There's nothing I can do. I'm not Canadian. I'm not under their jurisdiction. In 1868, when the 14th
Well, I would
Amendment was
argue with that.
ratified,
I think you are. You. I think that's a misinterpretation. Jurisdiction means like if you go to Canada, you're under their jurisdiction. That means like, for example, if
I'm
you
under their laws.
that's the same thing. That's what that means. So if you commit a crime in Canada, for example, you will be arrested by the Mounties or the local Canadian authorities, and you'll be punished under their laws. And there's no obligation for them to return you to the United States or give you any consideration whatsoever because you're American. You're under their jurisdiction. That's what that means. It doesn't mean that you have any rights in Canada. I mean, you have whatever rights. I don't know what rights Canada gives to non-citizens.
I'm not sure.
In the U.S., all constitutional rights apply to everyone, whether they're a citizen or not.
So here's where it gets dicey, and this is why I was saying that would be really. I really wish we had Steve Gill on here, because I would love to bounce this off of him, or the dude that he had lunch with the other day. Trump's border czar. That would be that would be huge. Because yes, well, no, I am under their laws. I do have to. I can't, if I go up there and commit murder. Yes, I'm going to be held accountable by their laws. However, I have zero say. I have zero stake in their political system at all, because I'm not a Canadian citizen. True. So that's what I mean by jurisdictions, right? I guess it's a division of powers. Like, you have the lowest power, which is if you jaywalked, you're going to get a ticket, versus voting versus making policy. So I'm thinking about it as kind of like a pyramid.
Let me
maybe I'm using the wrong word.
Yeah, I think it's a misinterpretation of the word jurisdiction. I'm looking online now. Definition of jurisdiction is the legal authority to hear and decide cases or to govern or legislate within a specific area. It also can refer to the territory where a court or government agency has the power to act. So it's not about individuals, it's about the state entity. So so I'm going to read the text of the 14th Amendment. All persons born or naturalized in the United States, that would include, say, anchor babies, like in the scenario that I described, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof is the United States. In other words, subject to U.S. control. Okay, they're in the U.S. And I think they put that in because if it happens, let's say in the old Panama Canal zone or some other place, or Guantanamo, right? The U.S. controls Guantanamo, or let's say a U.S. embassy in Belgrade. That's U.S. It's controlled by the U.S. If you were born inside that embassy, you would be covered by the 14th Amendment. Are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws.
Right. So now let's look at context, right? Because this is made in 1868. It was after the war between the states, and it was made, let's be honest here, immigration was not a thought here. It was about giving citizenship to slaves, and I can prove it. And I've had this debate several times.
No, that is true.
When this amendment was written, the continental United States, you had the states, and then you had the territories, Montana Territory, Indian Territory, what have you. That was all under the jurisdiction, if you looked at the political map of the United States. Indians were not American citizens, even though they're born in North America. They were, to your point, technically, yes, they were an Indian that was born in the Sioux Nation in 1864 was technically, as far as the United States government was concerned, you are in Montana territory. However, you are not an American citizen.
Correct.
Your parents are not American citizens. You have zero say. And that's so I'm talking about here is from the context of it. I think that if anyone back then in 1868 would, if we could go back in a time machine and say, hey, 160 years from now, you're going to have some open border schmuck who wants to change the demographics of the country, bring in the third world, crap all over the working class, and they're going to use your amendment to do it. I guarantee you that the people who wrote it would 100% make sure to put in there, this does not include immigration. This is for freed slaves.
Well, I mean, yeah, not to mention, of course, obviously, I mean, the thing is, I think the importation of slaves ended around 1820 or 1815 or something like that.
It did.
But there were still, by 1868, there still would have been a number of them who had been born overseas in Africa or wherever, right? And so they wanted to make sure that those people were considered citizens of the United States, right? That was
you're making my
purpose.
Point. And that's just the thing. It's just like to say that by virtue of where, like, say if me and my wife, let's just say, for example, we were coming in from China, and we want to do this whole birthing tourism thing, I would wait till she's about ready to pop. I would fly over to France, Belgium, wherever else. I say, okay, honey, pop a squat, pop Junior out, and we're going to stay, because that's
wouldn't work in France or Belgium. Yeah,
well,
most European countries don't have birthright citizenship, and it causes a lot of problems. I mean,
100%.
like I described. I mean, you're going to have problems no matter what, right? So if you have this, we know what the problems are, right? It's like, sorry, it encourages illegal immigration.
Of course it does.
And on the other hand, if you don't have it, then people are not vested in the system. To me, this is extremely analogous to, the problem of, like, say, driver's licenses for illegal immigrants. I thought that was an absurdity when the idea first came up. But having been hit a couple of times by undocumented illegal immigrants who could not and did not have insurance, I'm pretty grateful for the fact that now New York lets those people get insurance, and that can pay for my car when these people hit it, right?
But how about this though, Ted? How about if that person wasn't here in the first place, so he couldn't hit you? How about that job went to an American? Just saying.
Then you're getting into the broad issue, which is not to be ignored, of why the borders are open in the first place, and how much, if any, immigration should be allowed into the U.S., which has always been a fraught issue in America.
I can answer that question for you right now, Ted. I can answer that question for you right now. The Republican Party wants it because they want the cheap labor. Let's be honest. As me and you, we've had this conversation before.
That's true.
You have rightly said that inflation is always going to go up. That deflation is the biggest enemy that the corporate whores in DC worry about.
Yeah,
they do not want the cost of living to go down.
Ever.
Well, then as prices go up, how then do you keep wages down? The way that you keep wages down is twofold. One, you import an entire class of people who have no skin in the game, who are here specifically for the purpose of driving wages down, and that impacts people like me who are a member of the working class. That's why,
that's true. That is
true.
That is why they do it.
And it's just we talked to Angie Wong on Friday when she's like, "Oh, well, you have a problem with your insurance company, sue them." How the dusty hell am I going to sue United Healthcare when I make $40,000 a year? How square that peg?
Dude, I don't care if you made $4 million a year. You don't have enough. You could never have enough money to prevail in court against a company like United Healthcare. Does not matter.
But that's the point, though, is that the immigration comes in to drive wages down. The Democrats like it because, let's be honest, they like the votes. before Reagan's amnesty in the
Although
80s.
they're kind of wrong, because the Democrats have always assumed that, particularly that illegal immigration would be majority Latino, and that at least the second generation of those immigrants would be likely to become Democratic voters. That was always an assumption. We saw in the last election that's not a safe assumption for Democrats.
But it's a pretty solid one, and I'm going to put up two different examples for you. One is California. California used to be reliably red. I'm not going to call this conservative. California is never conservative, but it was a Republican state. And Georgia, which is the deep South amidst the Bible Belt, Atlanta has turned Georgia purple.
It's purple
because of immigration. Virginia is the same thing. Northern Virginia,
Arizona, the land of Barry Goldwater, used to be.
So I mean, it is right. And here's the thing, right? If you are importing a whole new class of voter, why then does either political party have to run on ideas and win your vote and win mine? They don't have to, because you're importing a whole new class, a whole new political class.
Right.
That's where nothing changes.
That's true. I mean, but the thing is, okay, so given the system as we currently have it, okay, well, let's get into Trump, right? So yeah. Trump has, I think, some major barriers legally and politically to pull this off. I mean, first of all, politically, he's going to get major pressure from his big donors who prefer open borders, who prefer more immigration, both legal and illegal. They prefer illegal immigrants because illegal immigrants drive down wages more because they can't complain, they can't fight, and they tend to be less skilled and less qualified. So they drag the wages down more, and business loves that. Sure. But so Trump's donors are going to be like, Donald, come on, let's be reasonable. Let's not do that. But then there is this, constitutional amendment issue. He says he's going to pass an executive order to do this. I don't think he can. I think it will be that some immigrant advocacy group is going to go and immediately go to a federal court and get an emergency injunction that will stay that executive order indefinitely until it gets to the Supremes. And even with a 6-3 conservative majority, SCOTUS is going to say the 14th Amendment is clear. Unintended consequences don't matter, right? Second Amendment is a classic example of unintended consequences. The founding fathers didn't think that people would have AR-15s. They thought that they would have muskets so that they could hunt and join a militia to defend their territory. There's a lot of constitutional amendments that have unintended consequences. The point is, the law is the amendment is clear. You can't. And you can't change it unless you get 3/4 of the states to ratify a change. And we haven't been able to do that really successfully in any meaningful way in 60 years. Right? It's not possible to amend the Constitution anymore.
As far as the Second Amendment goes, I'm pushed back just a little bit because the Constitution says the only necessary institution is the militia. So you got that. So I think that if George Washington knew the AR-15s or AK-47s would be a thing, I think he'd be like, go get them. I'm telling you, if I could go buy a tank right now from Walmart, I 100% would, because I want this. I want the state. Basically, I don't want the federal government to have a monopoly on force, and the entire idea of a well-regulated militia. Kind of going off topic here, and I'll go right back to immigration. I'm going to tie this all in. Is the word regulated? Back when it was written, meant well-trained. It was responsibility of the state governors to regulate or train the militias, and the militia was always supposed to be trained to the point what the standing army was. So it was a very strong. They were very fearful of too much centralized power. And as far as immigration goes, now here's the thing, right? If I had it my way, and it's never going to happen, because like I said, the Republican Party left me years ago. You talked about these immigrant right groups. When am I going to have an advocacy group for the people in Gary, Indiana, whose livelihoods have been destroyed because their job has been exported? When will the people in Columbia Falls, Montana, have someone speak up for them because the aluminum plant went away, and so now these towns are dead? When are the people who are legacy Americans, like old-fashioned Americans, black, white, whatever color, who are getting crushed by millions of people being brought in for jobs that quote unquote Americans won't do because they're not getting paid enough? What's going to happen when all those jobs are automated out anyway? And all of a sudden you have millions of people here who don't speak the language, have a different culture. What are they going to do? What happens when all these jobs are automated away?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, look, I think the real dilemma in immigration, I mean, is the first generation people who come here, right? I mean, they have the hardest time. The second generation, they're Americans, right? They speak fluent English. Their kids, they're as American as you and me.
Sure.
And I think so. The adjustment period, I mean, if you look at like the editorial pages of newspapers from the 1870s, 1880s, you'll see the same sort of concerns and complaints about Irish, Italian, and German immigrants, where they're like, they live in, they're insular, they live in their own communities, they don't learn English, they're not like Americanized, they bring their weird costumes, they don't dress like us, they don't act like us, they don't talk like us. And, I mean, obviously that's not true anymore, right? I mean, the Germans and Italians and Irish and all these other ethnic minorities are now the majority of the country. I mean, over 50% of Americans are descended from Germans. Sure. So, I mean, and they, we used to be like basically a bunch of former Brits. I mean, the white folks were anyway.
Right. But here's the difference, though, right? Because back in the 1800s, more European immigrants went back home than stayed because there wasn't a welfare state. I mean, you can't have open borders and a welfare state. It simply does not work. Second thing is, back then, you had to assimilate. You had to learn English to be able to function. I mean, you had to. Nowadays, you don't have to do that. You can come over, drop a baby, get to go to Chinatown, a little Haiti, whatever else, keep speaking Chinese or Creole or whatever else, get your $2,000 a month, courtesy of Uncle Sam, get put up in a nice little hotel room, and you ain't got to do nothing at that point. No, screw that. Absolutely not. Deport them schmucks. Now here's the compromise that I would make. And as you know, I'm a hardliner. If I had it my way, I'd deport the dreamers. I'd send everybody back. But here's a compromise, though, that I would make if the government would actually do it. You're a second generation legal immigrant? Fine. I will give you citizenship. I will give your kids citizenship. 100%, no problem. I want one thing in exchange. Close the freaking border. End it.
Now,
if
you're not going to closing the border, would you close it and not allow any more immigration, legal immigration? How do you feel about legal immigration?
Legal immigration is fine. Like, for example, if you are a doctor or something like that, and you want to come over, if you're skilled, not a problem. But no, Jose coming over here to pick coffee beans? No, sorry. We have enough bean pickers.
I mean,
I don't need
but
that.
Honestly, I mean, as someone who considers himself skilled at least one thing, talking about politics, I wouldn't be very happy if the U.S. government was importing like talk show hosts from other countries who have a cuter, more charming like English accent than I do, and are competing with me for a job. I mean, we have a lot of unemployed and underemployed skilled workers in the United States. We have doctors, lawyers, engineers, computer programmers who are out of work. And they have to compete against like H-1B foreigners to get jobs.
Oh, absolutely. And now, like I said, I mean that's a compromise that I would make. Me personally, I would end all immigration for 100 years. No one comes in. Fortress America. You sit off the northern border, sit off the southern border, close off the coast. No one comes in. You're freaking done. You can come here to go to Disney, but that's it.
I mean, I got to tell you, I think, first of all, I would not do that for the simple reason that we just don't know where the country will be in 50 or 20 years, much less 100. It's bad to have a
nuclear war with Russia. Who the hell knows?
But it's bad to have any policy that sort of like makes it impossible for future generations to have the flexibility to adjust to the possibility of changing circumstances.
I mean, immigration was closed. I can't remember what the name of the act was. But immigration was ended. What says late 1880s or 1890s? I have to
Well,
Google it.
there was the Chinese Exclusion Act.
Yeah, so I mean, they just closed that. They ended immigration for up till up till the 60s.
Well, I mean, ish. There was still some people trickling in for sure, and
Yeah,
and there was
but not in the
the
massive
Barcaro
numbers of not
program.
in the waves.
No, that's true. And that is true. I mean, the thing is, I also kind of like think about how many parts of the country have been really enriched by foreign influence. I mean, I used to have a talk show at KFI in Los Angeles. It's a big AM talk station, and I was like one of the token lefties on a very conservative station. So most of the callers were conservative, and many of them were nativist, and they would say like, oh, these fucking people, they're ruining everything. And I was like thinking, do you know how boring California would be without like a Mexican influence or Spanish influence? I mean, the architecture everything would look like, the set of Poltergeist, like just basically just like identical, like little boxes on the hillside, like really, really bland. I mean,
Sure.
the food would suck. I mean, foreigners bring a lot of cross-pollination, and history has proven, you're a student of history,
Sure.
there's like the Silk Roads, the conflict of the intersection of different cultures generates new innovation, economic growth. I mean, you don't want to lose that.
Well, no, but on the other hand, though, I mean, you just can't just fling the gates open and say everybody just come right on in. Everyone has a right to come here. You're a citizen of the world. Countries don't matter. Borders don't matter.
No, you should check.
I mean,
anyone who comes in, I want some federal government agency to check them out and know who the fuck they are before they.
But we don't have that.
That's basic.
But we don't have that. And you see, and here's the thing, right? I mean, in a perfect world, and to kind of just kind of point this out. Like Mr. Lee called me a racist in the chat. I'm gonna tell you right now, it has nothing to do with being race. This is not a racial thing for me. It is about what is best for the American people. Why should a steel worker in Pennsylvania, or why should a farmer or a rancher in Kansas have to compete against someone who should not even be here? One of the reasons why housing prices keep going up, but it's twofold. One, we keep printing money. Inflation has to go somewhere. So real estate's a good place. The other thing is, if the population went down,
well,
there'd be more housing.
It's also legal policy. I mean, the tax code, for example, provides you with subsidies for buying, interest on buying a house. If you borrow money to buy rare political buttons on your credit card, that's not going to be subsidized by the government. Your mortgage is subsidized.
Well, no, but the point I'm trying to make is if the population goes down, you have more empty houses. The supply and demand is a thing. It would be more affordable for people to be able to, I don't know, buy a house because there's fewer people. You're not competing with millions and millions of people. How many people have came over illegally over the last 4 years? No one has a freaking clue.
Yeah,
we know it's in the millions.
Vary. It's definitely millions for sure. I mean, the question is also, how do you define illegal, right? I mean, do you include people who followed the rules and like presented themselves at the border and applied for asylum?
Yes,
you're really illegal because I mean, you followed.
You ain't.
If you filed the if you follow the government's rules, you did what they told you, then you did what they told you, right?
Then let me tell you what President West would do. I'd bring back stay in Mexico. You stay there till a judge sees your case for 4 or 5 years. And if I'm sorry, but people have agency in the countries that they live in. They have the ability to change things for the better in the countries in which they are born in. You don't have to come here expecting a handout, expecting Joe Citizen America to bend over, give you everything at the detriment of his kids or grandkids. Sorry, that's not how this works.
Well, I mean, okay, I've got to bring this up, Robbie. When did your parents come? I mean, I assume your people didn't cross the Bering Strait at the end of the last ice age. How did you? What's your background? Where did your people come from?
So my folks, the Wests from the genealogy that we've done, came back. They went and watched in Virginia in the early 1600s.
Okay.
So that's how long that they've been here. So they
were,
settled.
So they were basically English colonists.
Yep. They're English colonists, and so what they did is that they settled in what's now West Virginia. When the war between the states broke out, my family split. Some of them went with the South. Some of them stayed with the North. I'm from the Southern branch.
Now, of course, I have a good friend. She's Native American. We've had her on the show once, Valerie. She says, she would say like, well, your people, they were illegal immigrants. They came to North America without any permission. They didn't talk to the tribal nations. They just showed up.
And they conquered them. That's the difference. Well,
okay,
all through age. And I hate to say this, but I mean, it is the human condition. Making that argument, the Greeks today can make the same argument for their ancestral lands in Anatolia because they were there first. The Turks came, wiped them out. The Jews, they said they have the right of return for Israel because you have people who are whiter than me with red hair and freckles saying that my ancestor herded cattle back here 3,000 years ago. I get to come back because of a promise that was made to Abraham. Sorry, that's not what that means. But that's the argument that's said that's there. I mean, migration happens. Nations go to war.
You're kind of in a backhanded way, and we should like wrap it up here. You're kind of giving advice to migrants that maybe they should conquer us, and then we won't have anything to say about it.
Tell you what, they want to fight it out. Come on up here. We'll see you guys more guns. Bring it.
All right. I think this was a great conversation. I'm glad we had it. I am really, truly.
Well, it needs to be had. And now here's the thing. And Lee, I'll tell you right now, I'm not a racist. I'm not a bigot. What I am is an American. What I am is a father. I have an obligation to my kids. I have an obligation to my grandkids that ain't born yet. My obligation is to leave them with a country better than the one that they found. And if that means pointing out that the fact that we have zero obligation to import the third world because of some kind of guilt complex, so be it. Call me whatever it is you want to call me. I do not care. But debate me on the merits like what Ted's doing. Don't just take the chicken way out and say, oh, you're just a racist. Screw you.
I'm all about the ideas. Name calling is always where logic and reason always goes to die. I always fear once someone starts calling me names, I kind of figure I've won the argument. that's the way I look at it.
I completely agree. I mean, because at that point, you don't have an argument.
All right, everybody, we're going to leave that there. Let me sort of bring us through the usual outro stuff. Please subscribe. I've said this at the beginning of the show. I'm saying it again at the end of the show. If you're not a subscriber, either on Rumble or on YouTube, or you can do both, actually. Nobody's going to know. So please do both. Please do it. Please become a paid subscriber on Rumble. It's $5 a month. It really helps us in a big way. If you like what we're doing, find value, please help us continue. And also do chime in and get in touch. TMI Show question at Yahoo. TMI Show question at yahoo.com. Get in touch. You can also just send us a comment. You don't have to send us anything that we are going to run. We're fully independent here. And also if you have suggestions for things we could be doing better or how we're screwing up or whatever, do let us know. Thanks for joining us. Please. Thanks to Robbie West for not only for supporting and moderating the chat, but for filling in for Manila Chan. Hopefully Manila Chan will be back tomorrow, but we'll keep you posted on that either way. Please go check out the Putinbot Gaming channel. And that's pretty much it. Subscribe, and please support all independent news and content creators wherever you find them, even if they're illegal immigrants. Okay,
or conservatives.
I had to get it, or conservatives. All right, see you, everybody. See you tomorrow, 10 o'clock Eastern time here on the TMI Show. Bye.
Have a good one, y'all.